So we got a couple of minutes before the live stream is actually supposed to start. It's supposed to start in 5, and I think that's probably about 2 minutes away. But I figured I'd go ahead and get the live stream started here. Maybe we can gather up a few more people into the stream before we get started on it. This is a members only live stream, so thank you very much. If you have, obviously you had to join the channel to become a member in order to see this video, but I really appreciate you being here. Hey Brody, what's happening? And supporting the channel by, becoming a member. And I plan on giving you the best that I can, right? I mean, it's actually kind of fired up something inside of me to try and bring more value to the videos when it's a members only live stream or members only video, to try and bring something, more to the table for, to make it worth your money. But before I get started, I wanted to talk about the very first chapter inside of the essay, inside of Cantillon's essay on economic theory. And this is probably one of the reasons why I simply just don't follow politics as closely as a lot of other people would when they study the economy. And it's really stated straight up right in the very beginning of this essay. And let me read it to you. It says, following a century of neglect, William Stanley Jevons, in the first blush of discovery, proclaimed Cantillon's essay the cradle of political economy. Subsequent growth and development of economic thought has not really altered us to the subtleties of this succulent, if I'm saying this right, succulent appraisal. A cradle holds new life, and there can be little doubt that the essay added new life to the organizing principles of economics. But political economy does not accurately describe the subject Cantillon addressed. Indeed, he scrupulously avoided political issues in order to concentrate on the mechanics of the 18th century economic life. When confronted by this extraneous factors such as politics, Cantillon insisted that such considerations be put aside, so as not to complicate our subject. He said, thus invoking a kind of cratius paribus, if I'm saying that right, assumption before it became fashionable in economics to do so. So he says it right there that, that indeed he has scrupulously avoided political issues in order to concentrate on the mechanics of the 18th century economic life. So right there, Cantillon was saying, don't follow politics to understand these economic forces, right? I mean, there's political actions that are going to happen that are going to impact life and society and even economics. But it's not the politics that is creating the economic forces, right? They're interacting with the economic forces that are out there. And so a lot of times when we see the politics, we think about it in such a way that they're the ones who are in charge of what's happening, but they're not. They're interacting with these economic forces. It's kind of like the analogy when we were talking about the hammer falling from the third story hitting the guy on the ground, and that everybody wants to come up with a reason why it happened, and it takes one person to say, well, it was gravity that did it, right? The natural force of gravity, and then somebody else kind of changed that and said density, but whatever. It's still the same economic forces that are playing here, or natural forces that are playing out here. And so when I think about it, even in today's discussion, when we're talking about the global change, the global redistribution of manufacturing that is happening out there, and how I can see it happening in a in a progressive fashion, in which that when an economy begins to grow from their manufacturing base, increasing their standard of living, and then eventually importing the foreign products, which causes that manufacturing base to leave. When I see this happening, and I then get people telling me, dude, you're wrong. Look at all the tax breaks, look at all the tariffs, look at all this stuff. And they start listing all these things that are political actions to deal with this particular event that is happening, like this shift in global manufacturing, or to keep foreign production from, competing with the domestic manufacturers. Those tariffs, those taxes, those political forces simply would not exist if it wasn't for the economic force to begin with, all right? You can't say that they're the ones who are in charge or making this happen. They wouldn't even have that ability to do these things if it wasn't for the fact, right, that it was occurring. And that's really where I think like a lot of people kind of misunderstand it, or at least see it differently. Because I used to view it much differently than I do now. I mean, I very much looked at it from a political point of view. I looked at it from a left-right point of view. And I would throw blame and accusations and reasons and all kinds of stuff around, not truly understanding what was the actual force at play that was happening there, and how it is that these politicians are simply interacting with that and not really creating the situation. They're just dealing with the condition that it is in. All right. Okay. I'm kind of babbling there. Let's go on here. Oops. Get my glasses on. I can hardly see it here. Broken glasses. All right. I really like that usually signing up for some sort of membership subscription, e.g. Patreon, it feels like charity, but with the channel membership here, it really feels like I'm getting great value. Well, thank you so much, Brody. That's exactly what I am looking for. That's the kind of thing that's going to push me to do better at what I am doing, is to try and provide that value for you, right? And even just $1, even though it's just $1 a month, to me, that's a lot. That's a big deal, right? And to charge anybody anything for something that I am doing, I want to be able to provide you with the best that I can do. And I feel like inspired to do that, right? So I find that doing this membership thing is actually probably going to do better for the channel and for me and everything that I'm doing. All right. Lumberjack Landlord, thank you for being here, Matthew. Been looking forward to this live for hours. Right on. Well, I'm glad you guys made it. All right. Succinct. All right, you guys, I appreciate it. All right. It means said in a concise way. Right on. Thank you so much. I'm here right on all nighter. Good to see you. All right. Hey, ANH. Oh, is that all-nighter hider? I get it. Yeah, abbreviation. All right, Midwest Cannabis. Good to see you up in here. All righty, guys. So it's not much different from what I was going to be. I just really wanted to kind of, maybe break down a little bit more if we needed to, or maybe have, answer some questions on the whole idea of the manufacturing base leaving. Like a lot of times it's just, it's so easy for me to see it. Like, it's almost as if it's like you can almost just put the pieces into the playbook and then see how it's going to come out. Because, like, you think about it, anytime there's ever an increase in demand for something due to a shortage or a lack of, right, then you are going to have a lot of investment start pouring in to those particular items. So just for example, let's kind of talk about it with lumber, since I know a lot about lumber, right? so they say. But let's think about lumber. Well, lumber prices started to move up, right? And everybody was just like, oh my gosh, what is happening here? Look at the price of a 2x4. It went from $2.50 to $4 to $5, $6, $8, $10, right? And people are like, oh my gosh, look how valuable lumber's all of a sudden become, right? People are paying a lot of money for this lumber. Well, next thing I know, I'm hearing about people who are buying mills. Like, they're going to make a bunch of money milling up lumber because lumber is so expensive right now, right? And what I thought was funny about it is that even just the statement alone that you are going to mill up lumber because lumber is so expensive really shows like the misunderstanding of how the lumber market really even works, because technically you can't even mill up your own lumber and build a house with that unless it has been graded, right? So it has to be graded, inspected, and basically approved for the ability to be even used for a house. Now, you can mill up lumber and use it for trim, and you can use it for outdoor projects or something like that. But the actual construction of a house, it needs to be graded lumber, right? So even if you were to mill up all this lumber, then you have to go and pay somebody to grade it. Then you have to have a buyer for that, right? It's not exactly like an easy game to just jump into if you just go and get a portable mill and some logs and start sawing up lumber. It doesn't quite work like that. However, the investment going into the production of lumber through these mills and everything else skyrocketed, right? Everybody is going to take advantage of this. Well, the unfortunate thing that comes from it is that the people who do buy these mills or build them up do have to put some sort of effort into trying to maybe make some sort of product out of it. The products that they do build or make ends up flooding the market because there were so many of them, right? And then the price of anything that they were producing really falls to the ground. And now this is pretty typical of a lot of products out there. Like you can see it happening. We covered it in surgical masks, right? I mean, back during the pandemic when everybody was like, all paranoid about, spreading the sickness around and they were all wearing masks, right? Well, most of those surgical masks came from China. And China was like, we ain't sending you none, right? You're on your own. So the domestic producers of these masks really ramped up production, right? A lot of investment started pouring into them. Well, what ends up happening when all of a sudden the demand falls? Right? End of social distancing, you don't have to wear the masks no more, and the only people who are really buying surgical masks are hospitals. And they're going to buy the cheapest ones they can find out there, which are going to come from China. So now the domestic manufacturers of masks start to suffer the consequences of the overinvestment that they had done during the booming times. So again, like domestic manufacturing of these masks ramped up, that malinvestment now shuts down the domestic manufacturers here because they simply just can't compete with the Chinese manufacturing that has taken place. So you also have to think what was taking place in China during this time. They ramped up production too. So now overproduction of masks is now flooding the entire market. Nobody cares about masks anymore, right? It's like understanding this sort of thing, right? Now, I get it, like, the pandemic and the severing of the supply chain was a self-inflicted wound, right? But we also have to think there was economic forces that started to kick in because of that self-inflicted wound, right? All this malinvestment, all this redistribution of manufacturing or the supply chains and all that other stuff. This is the results. This is the natural forces that are now occurring due to the fact that we had severed our supply chain, right? When you do that, you cut partnerships and they start to reestablish new partnerships in other places. All right, let's see. Let's continue on here. All right. Hey, Brody, good to see you. Politicians are affecting the flow of the water, the economy, but it will still flow somewhere. Yeah, absolutely. Who is this? Self-education. I love the name. But yeah, now that's actually a good way to look at it, right? I mean, you can dam the water up, right? You can hold it all back, but eventually the pressure of the water is going to start finding its way, right? And if it's, if it's governed, right, you release the water, right? So you can release some of it out there, but it's still the natural flow of water that is occurring out there. You can't make the water flow. The water just naturally flows, and you try to deal with that, And I think that's pretty a good analogy too. All right. Well-typed, self-educated. Yes, it is. Oops, education. Is there no hope for automation to counterbalance the loss of manufacturing capacity by workers? No, I think there is. I mean, I think that's probably going to end up being one of the, the major differences that is going to be taking place, in which that, nothing really is exactly the same. Like history doesn't exactly repeat itself. It just kind of rhymes a lot. So yeah, I could see that being the case, that, automation is definitely going to come in and start being able to produce products in certain areas cheaper due to the fact that you have less labor costs going into it. Yeah, I could see that being, a contributing factor to it. However, we got to think also the efficiency that goes beyond just the automation. So yeah, you eliminate the labor part of it, but what about resources to the commodities that they need, or location for power, or distribution to, other parts of the world or something like that? May find that just because automation has now made the labor part of things cheaper, it's still the location that the automation is taking place that then makes it even more cheaper to then move it to another location. Does that kind of make sense? So like, power, or just the cost of, warehousing or something like that, it could be cheaper to continue to still manufacture in another state because of that, despite the automation. I mean, at least that's kind of the way I see it. It's like no matter what you do, no matter how efficient you make something, the need for more efficiency starts to kick in as the profit is needed to be there, right? I mean, it's kind of like the capitalist way. You got to constantly grow until you eventually get to a point where you can't grow anymore, and then competition starts to beat you out. Like, I don't know. To me, that seems kind of very normal. And it's up to, the individual who's doing well, who's progressing well, doing a lot of business and making a lot of money to understand that, if you continue to grow and increasing your prices and the cost of your services and stuff, other people are going to see how well you're doing at that and say, hey, I'm going to take advantage of some of this situation too and start my own business and be cheaper and more efficient than that person. These are the naturally occurring things. You can't stop it from happening. It's just the way it is. I mean, you can try to stop it. You can create laws and govern it and stuff like that, but it's still the natural economic forces taking place there. All right. Thanks. Good to see you, all-nighter. Yeah, it is good. I love how all-nighter's here, man. He's like he calls himself the comment creator, but now he's doing content. So he's got his TikTok going and doing quite well as far as I'm concerned, as far as being consistent on the videos. Good job on that, all-nighter. All right, gotta anticipate the bullwhip effect or get caught off guard. Yeah, and that's the big thing. Like, it's hard to see the bullwhip effect. It really is. Like, the bullwhip effect, it hits everything. It hits like, you're going to see it big time. I think you're going to see it big time in warehouses. Warehouses that were built like mad, like massive amounts of warehouses were built to store all the stuff because we were going to be, reshoring all this stuff. We couldn't have this just-in-time delivery where we had stuff stored way, far away. We had to bring it back here and store it here so that we have access to it. This was like kind of the narrative behind it. So lots and lots of warehouses were built. They're not needed anymore, right? They don't need this because here's the thing. No matter how safe and secure reshoring a bunch of stuff is, there is no way that it can compete with a just-in-time delivery. It just can't. Like, there's no way. And so when you have like just-in-time delivery being reestablished, there's the warehousing is going to fail. Like, it just can't compete, right? And although it is a good idea to be, more self-sufficient, more, stuff local here or domestic so that we have access to it, it's capitalism, right? It's profit. That's as great as it sounds, it's not going to be that way because there's no money in it, right? The money is in just-in-time delivery and making, a profit that way. So it's going to beat out the warehouses, right? Once the establishment of the manufacturing and the distribution network is there, the warehouses are just simply not going to be needed. No matter how great they are or how damaging it was not to have them, it's still, it can't compete. Yeah. Okay. Love the hammer analogy the other day. Yeah, thank you. I was sitting there in bed thinking about that. Like, guys, I don't sleep. Like, I really don't. I get home, I crash out early, and I'm up very early in the morning, like 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning at times. And so I'm sitting there and I'm thinking about, this whole analogy, or coming up with an analogy to try and describe how economic forces are not something that can be changed. Like, they're there. Like, you can't change gravity. Gravity exists. You can be the person who says, no, we control gravity, just look at airplanes, right? I mean, okay, that's like, you can kind of manipulate the idea of the gravitational force, but it still doesn't stop gravity. Like, the plane stops power, that falls to the ground just the same as anything else, right? So gravity is an economic, or gravity is a natural force, much like a lot of economic forces that are out there. And yes, there is things that can happen. Like, you can manipulate the situation to try and say, hey, gravity is no longer existing because we have safety nets and we have, all these precautions and all this other stuff. So you don't have to worry about gravity anymore. No, that's not true. Gravity exists no matter what you do, no matter what you do, it's going to be there. So yeah, I like the hammer analogy too. All right. Would we get deflation if we try to balance the deficit? If we tried to balance the deficit, what we would get is probably some major inflation. Because what you're going to try and do, I mean, are you trying to balance the deficit? What deficit? The trade, like the trade deficit, or like the budget, like the U.S. government budget deficit kind of thing? Like we spend more than we take in. Like there's two deficits I think you might be talking about there. I mean, if we're talking about the trade deficit, then what you are basically saying is that we have to stop importing stuff and we have to export more stuff, right? So if we're not importing stuff and we export more stuff, what's going to end up happening to the items here in the United States? They're going to go up in price, right? If we can't import all this foreign production and we're exporting our own production, then that doesn't leave us with a whole lot of stuff to buy ourselves, and therefore the prices would start to move up. At least that's kind of the idea that I get behind it. Now, again, like, you know, so you also have to look at like dollar strength and demand for that at the time. And if we are not importing all this stuff, then we are not exporting dollars, right? Which then in turn was going to have its own issues on top of it. So it's not necessarily just a question of like, you know, if we had a balance of trade, is that going to cause the dollar to be, you know, worth more or less, or inflation or deflation? I just don't think it can exist in the same fashion of, can the dollar exist and not have a trade deficit? I just don't think those two can combine, right? I think the fact that the dollar exists because we have a major trade deficit, right? We are able to import stuff and export dollars and get those dollars out to the rest of the world. And that's really where like the dollar finds its existence, or can continue to find its existence, in that if that wasn't occurring, I don't think the dollar would exist anymore. So I just, you know, I don't know if that answers the question, but I hope I got that. All right. Like comparing economies to nature. Yeah. Semiconductor incorporation. Brody, UE, how does a up and coming economy compete with automation with a wealthy manufacturing nation, US? This is the thing. Like, it's not a matter of like, how do you get an economy to do this? Like, how are they supposed to compete? How are they? I don't know. Like, I don't know how they're supposed to do it. All I know is that if you have a very industrious people who are then taking advantage of the situation that is happening out there, being able to start businesses and build products and distribute products and stuff like that, the industriousness of the people themselves is what's creating the economy. You got to think, we are the economy. Like, the decisions that we make, the things that we do, the businesses that we start, those things, individually, we make up the economy. They can influence all kinds of stuff. They can influence the financial market. They can do a bunch of government spending. They can do all kinds of stuff to start interacting with the economy, right? But it's ultimately up to us, right? We are the ones making the decisions for ourselves. This is the reason why you find people who can absolutely kill it during down economic times, and people wonder how come they did so well, right? It's because they understood that this economy is theirs. Right? It's not somebody else's. It's up to them to understand what's happening there so they can best conduct themselves. It's like being the guy on the ground. Whether or not the hammer is going to come down on them, it's up to them to decide, man, is this the proper position for me to be in? Can I see what's going on? Do I know what's happening here? Am I safe? Right? Everybody around me is trying to tell me that it's good, that I'm okay, that this is where I should be, that this is the position I should be in, right? But I don't know that for myself, right? I'm listening to other people. If I knew this for myself, then I would know that, yeah, if that hammer starts coming down, I'm going to be able to deal with that, right? Whether it be getting out of the way or having safety nets or protection or whatever, it's up to you to figure that part out, right? Because if you listen to somebody else, that thing may hit you, right? It may hit you. All right, moving on. You guys having fun? All right, be sure and hit that like button. If we hit the like button if every single viewer hits the like button when they see this video, those who are not members of the video or of the channel will see the video and see how many likes there are, and they'll be like, man, this is a really quality video. It has to be. Look how many likes there are to the views. So yes, please hit that like button when you come in, because it makes a big difference. All right. Phillips curve kind of question. Do higher interest rates affect employment to the point that more 401ks are feeding stocks? Productive biz, not zombies. Yeah, that's, I would say that at one time, yes, that would be the case. And I guess it could be again, maybe again in the future. But it was difficult for me to, like, finally just like accept that the fact that the Phillips curve is no longer like working. I don't know like how to say that, but it was, because it just makes so much sense to me that when you have a lot of people working, right? The more people working, the more money they get, the more money they get, the more money they can spend back into the economy, the more money they're spending into the economy, creates the money velocity that's happening out there. A lot more products are being sold, and then you have the inflation, you have the hot economy starting to take place from that. So it makes sense to me that when you have like full employment or a lot of employment or low unemployment, that this would cause the expansion of the economy, right? That 401ks would rise, stock market would rise, everything would start to perform from it. However, the Federal Reserve, and it does seem to be the case too, especially if you go back and you look all the way to like the Trump administration, when unemployment stayed low pretty much the entire time, and yet there was no inflation, right? I mean, that was like, it was very odd. Everybody thought for sure that this would create the inflation, this low unemployment, but it never did. It just never manifested itself. And so there might be a lot of excuses for that, and I believe that it had a lot to do with the low interest rates, slowing down the return on capital investment. I believe that had a lot to do with the lack of inflation that the Federal Reserve was looking for. I believe that had a lot to do with it, but it doesn't change the fact that they can have full employment and still not create the inflation from it, because we haven't seen that happen yet. Like throughout the last 10 years, it didn't occur like it normally would have. So I'm not sure what that'll do, all-nighter. I mean, as far as like the increase in employment, you would think, or the higher amount of employment that is happening out there, that would contribute more to the 401k. I mean, I know like we used to have a different plan, but we got a new one set up for our own store like a little over a year ago. And so we all just started recently contributing to a 401k here. Like other people had previous ones, but the store just got set up for new employees and all that other stuff to contribute to it. So I could see in that fashion that there would create, an inflationary scenario just by having people working and then contributing to a 401k. I do wonder though how many businesses are actually offering up 401ks anymore, All right, moving on here. Been thinking bullwhip effect is similar to an invasive species. What do you think? Yeah, I mean, I guess that could be a way of looking at it. Like, if you all of a sudden have an environment in which that the production, like the expansion of this particular species, like all of a sudden they're able to reproduce quickly without anything happening to them, like, predators or anything like that, then yeah, that would kind of be like the bullwhip effect taking place. That would be like the malinvestment that would be taking place at the time. Like people's taking advantage of the high prices and they start investing into it. That starts creating more of the particular product. That would be like the invasive species, overproducing. And then what happens? All of a sudden there's too many of them and they can no longer handle the environment can't handle this many of them, and they start to collapse, very much like the manufacturers going out of business because too many of them were producing too much stuff. Yeah, I could see that's a good analogy. I think that works. Yeah. All righty, 19 of you up in here. Thank you so much for joining the live stream tonight, guys. All right. Memento. I would think the bullwhip would still happen in a free market, but would be less volatile for shorter time. Yeah, I believe in the bullwhip effect. I think would take place. I think that's an economic event that's going to happen no matter what. Like, just like anything. Like, I mean, if you find that you can produce something that people are buying and you don't know how much to produce, right? You're going to probably at some point end up producing way too much, or somebody else is going to see that and trying to jump into it. I think the free market would have the bullwhip effect taking place just as much, but I agree with All Nighter that it would probably be very quick, right? Because you think about it, like if you want to take advantage of, a particular product that is now in high demand, but you want to be a producer of that thing, well, you probably have to go and borrow money for it. You have to go and set it up, get it all, established and everything else that goes with it. So even like, in a system like we have now where it's heavily financed, that can contribute to the bullwhip effect just as much as if there was no financing taking place at all. Let's see here. No, the government deficit. Yeah. So the government deficit, like, I have a hard time believing that the government deficit is an accident. Like, I think that the whole idea of the government doing this massive amount of spending, like the insane amount of borrowing that they do, is done to provide the world with the safe and liquid asset of the US treasuries. Like, I know, like, a lot of people are like, man, that doesn't make any sense. But that's really what I feel. That if it wasn't for the fact that the United States goes into debt as much as it does, if it didn't do that, it would not be able to provide the world with the ability to use the dollar for the reserve currency, right? Because, like, if you didn't have the United States issuing out as much debt as it does, then the United States Treasury would not be considered the safe and liquid asset that would then back up pretty much everything, right? Like, when two nations, here's, I guess, an easy way to kind of understand it, is that when two nations want to do a deal with each other, generally they're doing it with dollars. Now, I understand that there's a lot of BRICS nations out there who are going to, like, get out of this. And in fact, we're going to talk about the BRICS nations for the next couple of days and do another live stream on Saturday talking about this. But if we just take it like, we just think about it for just a minute. If two nations are going to want to do a deal with each other, they're generally going to end up doing it in dollars, right? And then on top of that, dollars are kind of expensive to use. Like, nobody really wants to you do like dollar transactions because you have to pay the bank fees and you have to do all the other, issues that come along with, like, the security of trying to transfer dollars around. Most of the time, it's done in US treasuries because although they're not dollars, they can be accepted like dollars. They're as liquid as you can possibly get, meaning that you could sell or buy or sell them, very rapidly, and they pay a little bit of an interest rate to it. So most of the time when international trade is done, it's done in US treasuries, being used like US dollars, right? That safe and liquid asset like that gets used for all kinds of purposes, for collateral and whatnot, all over the globe, right? Because they're the safe and liquid asset that is, basically guaranteed by the government with zero chance of default. So, in my opinion on that, I am under the impression that the United States is forcefully going into debt to continue to provide the world with the reserve currency. Like, it's almost a necessity that has to happen. All right. An up-and-coming nation may well have much more affordable and more attractive entrepreneurial work, I think. Yeah. My mind went to budget deficit on that question. Yeah, and so, well, let's go back and read that question again real quick. Where was that? Would we get deflation if they tried to balance the deficit? So again, like, if you try to balance that deficit, what would that look like? So that means treasuries are coming due, getting paid, and then not rolling them over into new debts, right? So if it was, like, for example, the Federal Reserve who was owning these treasuries that came due and got paid, which is happening right now, those dollars come back to the Federal Reserve and disappear, right? So in that sense, then that would be a deflationary act, right? As the dollars are now coming back to the Federal Reserve and, essentially disappearing. Because really, you think about it, like, what is inflation? Inflation is the expansion of money and credit. Prices is the results of inflation. So really, that is a deflationary act. We are in a deflationary moment right now when you consider that the Federal Reserve is unwinding that balance sheet, meaning that they are bringing dollars back into the Federal Reserve and not rolling it over into new debt. So in that sense, that's a deflationary event taking place, right? But the government's not like going into, like, they're not reeling in the deficit, right? They're still going into the spending. So those debts are still being issued out there, and it's the market themselves that are buying them, right? So if you don't have a buyer like the Federal Reserve who can print up money and just go and buy as much as they want, now you're dependent on the market to buy these things. Right? And so the market instead doesn't print up money. They actually have to, decide whether or not it's a good deal, right? And so that is usually when the interest rates begin to rise and the prices begin to fall. So let's think about it from that fashion too, right? So if the government was to back off on the issuance of U.S. treasuries, okay, well, then that would start bringing in that would start reeling down or bringing down the deficit. Okay? So what would that look like? Well, that would mean less government spending that's happening out there. It would mean less, government subsidies and stuff like that. It would mean more taxes, right? Because we would have to charge more to pay for these damn treasuries since we're not rolling them over. So you would have less government, you would have more taxes, and with less government spending and with more taxes, there would be less economic activity happening out there, right? So with less economic activity happening out there, I would only assume that that would be a deflationary scenario that would come from that. All of it would be, and in my opinion, if you were to try and move towards something like that, it would actually create like a depressionary event. So major differences between, like, say, having a balanced budget during the Clinton administration as opposed to now. Right? Well, we have to think, like, the Clinton administration, everybody was like, they praise that. I'm not trying to get political. I'm just trying to say, like, what was occurring at the time, because whether or not it was, a good or bad thing, it's up to you to decide that. But when I look at that, like, the Clinton administration, everybody says, hey, man, there was a balanced budget right then. How come we can't go back to that? And I'm thinking, well, it wasn't exactly a good deal, right? Because, like, during that same time when we had this balanced budget, we had the U.S. embassies bombed in Africa. We had the World Trade Center bombed. A lot of people don't even remember that. They weren't hit by planes. They were actually had a big truck full of fertilizer that tried to blow the place up. The USS Cole was attacked, right? All these attacks, all this terrorism that started happening, and there was almost no repercussion from it. None. Like, a couple of bombs were dropped, right? But no like serious attempt to try and counter what was taking place or to create some sort of offensive of it. It just didn't happen, right? And whether or not we were in a vulnerable position because the military had been hacked so much, well, I don't know. Like, I mean, that's, again, like, I'm not trying to blame any political event on it. I'm just trying to say that's what ended up happening from it. So, yeah, you can try and balance the budget, but it doesn't put you in a good position, right? It kind of leaves you kind of compromised. Hi Dishes, hi All-Nighter, hey Dishes, hi Brody. All right, I suppose I'm wondering if profitable corporations can employ more people even with higher rates. I don't know. I mean, I would imagine that if it's profitable, then yeah, you would want to hire people. I mean, I think about, like, during the pandemic, these corporations got a lot of money and they went on a huge hire. Holy moly. Oh my gosh, somebody just sent me a huge super chat. I'll check that out here in just a second. Thank you so much. But I think about it, like, all these corporations, all of a sudden it ended up with a bunch of money, right? And, you've heard me talk about it, with the special purpose vehicles and the corporate, corporate debt lending facility. But these corporations ended up with a bunch of money. And what did they do? They hired people. They hired a lot of people with this money. And so I would assume that if a corporation is profitable, then yeah, they would probably end up hiring more people from that, and then in turn start, moving it back into the economy. But how do you do that? Like, corporations to me seem to be like existence on cheap debt. Like, that's like they all seem to exist using like cheap debt. And I mean, I guess as long as you have access to it, then you can continue to employ the people or something like that. But to me, like, I'm looking for that viable, like, way of being able to, bring something back to the United States in a way that is just like, man, this is strong and lasting. I don't see it. Like, I don't know how that can happen yet. Okay. You're saying all this is as though figuring it out is a simple thing to do. The economy is second order chaotic system, which is very hard to evaluate because an affect relationships within. Absolutely, it can. And this is the thing, Brody. Like, but my economy and your economy are different, and that's the reason why it's so difficult, right? To me, when I look at things out there in the economy, from my view of it, like, this is how I've interpreted it. Right? If you have, if you're George Gammon, you're not going to interpret this stuff the same way, right? It's just not gonna be the same, right? No matter what you do. So that's why it's important to understand it for yourself, right? Again, like, am I in a position in which this hammer's going to come down? Like, what's going to happen? So I think that's probably why it's so important to, like, continue to have these type of discussions, and so that we can figure it out for ourselves. Like, even from the political point of view, like, if you are very heavy politically mindset, right? Because I was at one time, like, I knew every congressperson's name, I knew all the bills, I knew so much stuff about it. I didn't know anything about the economy at the time, but I knew a lot about politics, right? And then I realized something about it. It's like, following politics was a terrible way to try and follow the economy, because I could never figure anything out, because I would always be blaming and saying this is going to cause so many problems or whatever. Once I started looking at and understanding economic forces, then going back in and looking at politics started making a lot more sense on the economy, right? They're interacting. They are interpreting the economy for the best view that they have, right? From the position that they are in. They don't understand you or me. They don't understand what it is that we need in our life, the conditions that we are in, the debts that we have to pay, the assets that we have accumulated. They don't know anything about that stuff, right? And so to say, like, under one blanket, hey, this is the way the economy is, it isn't like that. It doesn't work like that at all, right? Each and every single one of us has to understand this for ourselves so that we know what to do, right? So, because that person over there doesn't know. They don't know us. They don't know you. And I think that's why it's important. And I think Brody makes a great point on that too. It's just like, it is tough, right? But it's also important. Like, it's tough to understand, but it's also important, because otherwise it's just blind. You're just blindly, like, just going through it, just wishful thinking, hoping, like, that you voted for the right person or something like that. That's very dangerous. And to me, that's very dangerous. That's like, just standing there on the ground thinking, man, I hope that hammer doesn't hit me. It's just like, hope, no, man, no, if it's going to hit you or not. Let's go find that super chat real quick. Chicken Life 336, thank you so much for the $100. Man, that is just so awesome. Thank you. Simon, please share with Dishes Every Day and your kids. They should hear this about you. I wanted to let you know I am still dry and that I am 2 years sober on January 9th. You helped save my life. Never forget the good that you have put on out into this world. Jaws. Right on, Jaws, man. It's good to hear from you, bro. And thank you for the super chat, and thank you for the kind words, man. But you did it, man. You do realize that, right? It was you. I might have been telling my story, and a lot of times people can relate to that. But it was ultimately that decision that you made, right? I don't want to do this anymore. I want a different life. 2 years, bro. 2 years. That's amazing. I mean, I can't tell you how proud I am to hear that. To hear that you did it, and that you're still going. That's one of the things that came from this channel that I just wasn't expecting. Me telling my story about the alcohol and being a drunk and just loser life and whatever. It was embarrassing to do it, right? It's embarrassing to bring it out there, but I know that it was my past, and I'm not embarrassed about my past. It's just what it is, right? I'm proud of what I'm doing, proud of what I've done, proud of where I'm going. This is what this is why life is supposed to be. It's like, you're supposed to be motivated towards something and doing good in your life. And you know, coming out and just sharing my story and having people tell me, like Jaws, it's like, dude, your story got me to do the same. I think that's worth more than everything else in this entire thing that I've done, is to have, a guy like Jaws tell me that, or have other people, mention something very similar to me. It's like, I did not expect that to be the case. Like, I wanted to put information out to help people to, try to understand the economy. But telling that story, I did not think that was gonna take place. And man, that means so much more to me. Thank you again, Jaws. I really appreciate that. All right, let me go back up here. Read some of this. All right. Let's see. I know the Phillips curve died since Nixon served the gold standard, or even a few years before. Yeah. Yeah, and like I didn't want to believe that. Like, I mean, it just made too much sense to me that it would make that the Phillips curve would still be, that would play out, but it apparently it just doesn't. And so it's just like, I mean, like I said, it was hard for me to, like, wrap my head. It's like, dude, you got to exit that out. You got to take that out because it's just not part of it anymore. And to me, this is like, man, that's like an economic force that's happening there. But it is, but it's in a condition in which that we have these low interest rates, which kind of obscures a lot of stuff. So, yeah. Do, 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 do. 401k cash out will cost 20%. I like what lumberjack landlord did with his 401k. I think his employer pays it, but that doesn't require him to do the same. So he doesn't, if I have that correct. Yeah. I think you can set your 401ks up in different ways. Like, I mean, I got mine doing some matching. I gotta readjust it so it does complete, full contribution, because the company will match some of it, and it's like free money. Like, why wouldn't you do it? All right, let's see here. Hey everyone, hey Stephen, what's happening? Really, what does the employer care whether the employee is contributing or not? Yeah, I don't know. Like, they must get some sort of incentive off of that. Must get, a write-off or whatever for doing that. Didn't we see a recession right after the balanced budget because of liquidity? I believe you are absolutely right about that, all-nighter. It seemed like to me that there was, like, right after that, there was a pretty big recession that started kicking in. You think about it, you can't really pull back on government spending and not expect there to be a slowdown. Like, government spends so much into this economy, into the United States, into everybody's pockets, that the moment that they back out, then yeah, you're going to have a huge disruption to that. And there's going to be a lack of liquidity flowing around, since so many people are dependent on the government and their checks that they issue. So yeah, I can see that. All right. The deficit will double over the next 10 years, according to the CBO. Yeah, it's kind of weird to think. Like, how, it just gets to a point that you're like, man, how can this continue to go on? Like, I didn't think, when I first started studying this stuff a long time ago, I didn't think the dollar would last this long. So really, it is mind-blowing, but it's also to the point that it was just like, I can't accept the idea that it's not, like, it isn't going to happen because, the government can't afford it. Like, I can't use that term, like that language anymore, because there's so much that happened that I didn't think would ever possibly happen. So it's more like, being an observer as opposed to the prediction of what it is that the government can or cannot do. All right, that's what I was thinking. Seems like QE with no budget deficit would not be enough to keep inflation at 2%. All the politicians random speak talk about it still for some reason. Seems like quantitative easing with no budget deficit would not be enough to keep inflation at 2%. Yeah. Thanks, Chicken Live. Thanks. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I can almost see it happening now with the Fed funds rate up at 5%. It might take a little longer, but it almost seems to me that the next time we have a stimulus program, that I think it's almost an inevitability that they are going to have to issue out checks. Like, not just lowering rates to try and stimulate the economy, but they have to force feed the money right into us in order to get the economy moving again. And I really do believe that's because of the low interest rates that are happening out there right now. However, with the Fed funds up rate around 5%, that may give them the ability to stimulate the economy through the financial markets with the lower interest rates. But I still feel that there's going to be some sort of force feeding of money into the economy somehow. All right. It's amazing, Chicken Life. Yeah, it is. I mean, it is absolutely amazing, and it's great to hear. It was the dot-com bubble after the budget was balanced. Not sure how correlated the two are. I don't know. I mean, you think about it, if you start pulling a bunch of money out of the system or you start tightening up the liquidity out there, then it just doesn't flow into it starts finding more secure, better places to be. When you have money just flowing willy-nilly out there, then it starts going into places that it really shouldn't go. People start buying things that they shouldn't buy. They get luxuries that they really shouldn't afford, couldn't afford to begin with and shouldn't have purchased. That ends up being what happens. It's just like when the liquidity tightens up, well, then now it's not going to flow to those things anymore, right? It's not going to flow into like some .com thing that nobody has ever heard about. It might have flowed in there when the money was easy, right? And people are going to take a risk because, this money is everywhere and it's no problem. But as soon as it starts to tighten up, it becomes a problem. Well, it ain't going to allow it to flow into some .com, company or some cryptocurrency or whatever. It's the same kind of thing, and that's why you see these things do so terrible during the downturns, is because the only reason why they were doing well is because people were behaving with irrational exuberance, right? Once that turns away, then yeah, only the most viable is left. Did I say all that right? You've inspired me to not vote. I hope I didn't ruin you completely on the voting thing, but I don't agree. I agree with voting on my local stuff, like things here right locally within my community, but I lost it voting for president. I mean, voting for president in Oregon is pointless. It's absolutely pointless. Even if I wanted to vote for president, it wouldn't make any difference, right? We are a mail-in ballot. We have 3 electoral votes, right, for Oregon. So by the time they even count our mail-in ballots, they have already announced the president. President has already been declared. Our votes we still haven't, declared our, direction on which way we're going to go, but the president has already been selected. So whether I voted or didn't vote made zero difference, right, in the outcome. None. Oregon is pointless. There's no point in voting for president in Oregon, because by the time they count it, it's already said done deal. Right? We don't make any difference. And so that's sad. Like, I would like to think that my vote counts, but it don't. It never has, ever. Let's see. 6 days, Jaws. Right on. Good for you, all-nighter. All right. Hi from Melbourne. Nice to see you here, Australia. Wow. Welcome, Enmity. Love it, Simon. I'm not proud of my past. I try not to regret it, but really, I'm enthusiastic about the future. Yeah, absolutely. That's just the thing. Like, if you don't have I mean, I don't think like, oh man, I really regret my past or something like that. I don't. Like, if I didn't go through all the crap that I did, if I didn't face a lot of the hardships that, I'd put myself into, then I wouldn't have learned the lessons that I needed in order to conduct myself the way I do today. Right? Like, if I didn't go through the pain and the misery of it, then I wouldn't be in a position that would be more understanding of that. Like, it had to happen. And it's, as much as it sucks because there was a lot of consequences that came from something like that, from doing it, but still the overall lesson that I had learned from my life was well worth it, right? It put me where I am today. And so, I'm thankful. I'm actually thankful that it all took place. Like, even all the crappy stuff that has ever happened to me always seemed to have some sort of good result in the end, no matter how I looked at it, right? I mean, I would want to blame and hold regrets and hold resentments and hold all or the stuff, right? But then I look back on it all and I'm like, man, if that didn't happen, you wouldn't have had all these awesome things take place after that, right? So be thankful that it occurred, because if you didn't go through that pain, you wouldn't have had this. And I try to look at that like all the time, including like, the years I spent being, drunk, like I wasted all those years, all that money, all that time, but if I didn't do it, I wouldn't be here doing this. I mean, it was worth it, I guess. All right. Good evening, UE. Good evening, MLB. I made it to retirement, guys, and you will too. Live your best life. Well, thank you, Deja Vu. That's really awesome to hear. Yeah, congratulations. Absolutely. Well worth it. Thank you, All-Nighter Hider. Yeah. Yes, congrats, Deja Vu. Safety meeting time, Midwest. I'm packed and loaded. Good All-Nighter. All right. 2024 is going to be a blast. What would signs of dollar is failing? What ways to prepare individually for the dollar failing? Okay, well, I think this is a good topic to hit in on. We're going to cover this. I think this is going to be a good one for the next couple of days because, like I said, I want to talk about the BRICS nations and, talk about the use of the dollar as a world reserve currency. Because the dollar failing, this is one that I have a very difficult time wrapping my head around happening anytime soon, right? Now, I do see the dollar failing eventually, right? Because all fiat currencies come to an end. But there's like, just take for example, I was reading an article talking about Brazil, right? And this is one of the things that I'm going to bring up here over the next couple of days too. But I was reading an article about Brazil. And ultimately what I had typed in was Brazilian dollar denominated debt. I think that's what I typed in. And you would be surprised, right? From all the articles that you hear about how these BRICS nations are getting out of the dollar, how many of them, like Brazil or India or China or any of them, South Africa, I don't care, all of them have dollar denominated debts. Those guys have to come up with dollars for like 10 years now, for the next 10 years in order to pay back those debts. Like, the BRICS nations don't see the dollar disappearing in 10 years. They have debts that are due in dollars for the next 10 years. Like, I just step back and I just look at that for just a second. I was just like, okay, there can be all kinds of reasonings, excuses, and all kinds of stuff out there. There is debts that are due in dollars written by foreign nations, the BRICS foreign nations, that are then going to require them to acquire the dollars, right? It was going to require them to acquire the dollars in order to pay back these debts. That tells me that they are not getting out of the dollar. Like, they may be getting out of a lot of the dollar for their international trades and doing all kinds of stuff and trying to circumvent the whole system and using their own sovereign currencies and all this other stuff. Take a look at the amount of dollar denominated debt that is being issued by these nations. It tells me straight up they are not getting out of the dollar. They may get out of the dollar in some fashion as far as doing their transactions. They are not getting out of the dollar. They are borrowing dollars. Right? They are borrowing dollars, and those dollars are due back plus interest. So I don't see it. I don't see the dollar failing. And even if it was, it would have to be all those nations no longer doing that, right? Like, you would have to get all the nations, Turkey and China and all the Eurozones and all the other like friendly nations, all of them, they would have to stop borrowing in dollars. That is such, like, to me, I have a hard time even fathoming that part of things. Like, they're not going to borrow in dollars anymore, even though that's what they're doing right now. So it's like, to me, it gets to a point where it's just like, this is a completely hypothetical situation, this dollar failing thing, right? Now, what would that be like? What would the dollar failing be like? Well, it would mean that the U.S. treasuries were not getting paid. That's what the dollar failing would be like, because the dollar is really just how a representative of like what it is that the United States is going to do in order to acquire them to pay back those U.S. treasuries. We promise that we will send men with guns to go and take stuff from you in order to pay those U.S. treasuries. That right there has a lot of clout, right there. The United States has promised that they will send men with guns to take all your possessions in order to make sure those U.S. treasuries get paid. So, yeah, how can the dollar fail? I don't see it. Not yet. Like, all the nations of the world would have to get out of it. People themselves would have to stop taking out debts in dollars. The United States would have to stop issuing out U.S. treasuries. The Federal Reserve would have to unwind their balance sheet to zero. Like, I don't see it. I mean, not yet. It's going to end up going in a fashion in which that is completely lost all confidence within the entire globe. That's what it's really going to take for the dollar to fail, is a confidence failure, right? And at this point, I don't see it yet. Not to say it couldn't happen, but I mean, I just don't, I can't, like, I have a hard time fathoming that, what would the signs be of the dollar? It would be this people, like, the signs of the dollar failing would be people literally getting out of it, like not issuing out those treasuries, like Brazil and Turkey and Russia, and like, well, Russia doesn't really issue out a whole lot of U.S. treasuries right now, but what they did do, well, not U.S. treasury, I'm sorry, U.S. denominated debt. But what did end up happening a few years ago is Russia failed to pay those things, and that created a whole, problem within itself. And I never did hear about the credit default swap situation with that. Like, I thought that was going to start kicking in some major defaults, or, like a domino of credit default swaps kicking in or something, but it never really did. So I don't know. I should probably read up on that again. All right, the speed of direct injection money too, fast acting. Yeah, and it's going to be like, and that's where, like, I think, kind of jumping back on that, the money injection kind of thing, that's where, like, central bank digital currencies could really play a pretty key role in it, because at that point you can limit the amount of time that you have with that currency. This is like, hey man, you got a stimulus, you got to go out and spend it, you got 30 days or else it's gone, right? So that, like, forces people, it's like, oh crap, we got to go do this right now, right? So that gets money velocity going too. So yeah, I could see where, like, central bank digital currencies could kick in and make that happen. I'm literally crying over this super chat. This is the best live stream ever. Well, thank you. I don't mean to laugh at that, but I'm glad it's touching. This is the point of it. This is what I really want to, do with this channel, with the information, with the community and all that, is to have something that we are close to, right? Something that we understand, something that we know is not like, it's not fakery, right? There's a lot of times you go onto these YouTube channels, and especially even on mine, where you get like all these people who are trolling and just like, making fun of other people and names and stuff like that. That's not helpful. That's not helpful for anything. But going through these discussions, breaking these things down, talking, even sometimes, bringing out some personal, experiences from my past or whatever. If this is what it takes to make this thing happen, then this is what we're going to do, right? And it's working. It works well. All right. Okay. My biggest luxury is my son. Wouldn't have it any other way. Well, good for you. That's a great comment there, Deja Vu. Yeah, Memento, these get very special. Sweating eyeballs happen. I thank you guys, thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of this community. Thank you for being part of the stream and the channel and everything that you have done for me. It's like I can never tell you how much I appreciate the change of life that has happened for me. It like I look back and I talk to like a lot of my friends, people who've known me like my whole life. And it's funny because they know I have a channel. They know it's a big deal. They've seen what I've done, go and do the Rebel Capitalist or the Silver Symposium, or, put out a lot of content or put out a really viral video or something like that. They've seen me do a lot of this stuff, right? They've seen where I've been in my past. They saw, the condition that I was in, and they see where I am today. And I tell you, I don't think any one of them who know me personally, who know me well, think any differently of me, right? They know me as Simon. They know me as that dude who does the YouTube, that guy who used to drink, whatever. But I haven't changed. Like, I'm still the dude. Like, I even like ran into an old high school, friend, and they were like, "Man, you haven't changed since high school." And I don't think I really have. Like, this is who I am. This is who I am gonna be. Like, I know it's changed, like, the YouTube and everything and the money, the ad revenue that came in, like it got me the ability to get a house and get out of debt and stuff like that. But ultimately, this is it. This is who I am going to be. And I don't know if, like, even if I was to make $1 million a year, I don't think it would change me that much. I don't know what it would do. Like, I might travel more. That would probably be something I would do. All right, moving on here. Could you explain how the Federal Reserve is a private bank? What would be the difference if it was a, say, public? Okay. Well, okay, there's probably the biggest difference is that being a private bank is that I think that's probably one of the reasons why following politics is very difficult to try and understand what's happening within the central banking system. Because every nation out there, they own their central bank, right? The nation, like the government, is in control of the central bank. But the United States is not. We have a privately owned central banking system. And this is probably why it's able to hold on as long as it has. Because if it was a true government entity, they probably would have destroyed themselves just trying to make voters happy, right? But because they are independent thinkers, right? Supposedly independent, right? And they do not act in accordance to what the government is wanting, regardless of what people think or say, right? Because of that, they are able to conduct themselves in a way that they feel is most appropriate for the monetary policy and the world reserve currency, because they got two things going on. They have to deal with the monetary policy for the United States, and they have to deal with it as the world reserve currency as well. So being that independent, right? Being that independent thinking away from the government means that they do not have to do things that then satisfies the constituents out there. Okay? And I think that's very important to be the difference, between like having a central bank from that's owned by the government and having one that's privately owned. So I don't know if that's like kind of the answer that you were really looking for on that, but that's really like, I think probably what the major difference in it is that they can then be like make decisions that are not going to be like, pissing the voters off and then they lose their job because they get voted out. Like that's the way most of them would end up happening, is that they would end up being worried about losing their job, so they would conduct themselves in a way that would get votes, right? As opposed to what would be the most appropriate, position for monetary policy. Now, whether or not the Fed does that is putting us in a position that's most appropriate, I mean, that can be debated as well. But I think that's kind of the idea behind having a private central bank as opposed to one that's owned by the government itself. All right. Yeah, voting for prez is BS. It seems to be for me anyway. I mean, I don't want to. Don't want to say that. Like, I don't like using those words. Like voting for president is BS. I don't like that idea of it, but it's my experience with it. So what am I going to say? I mean, I'd be delusional to say no, it matters. All right. Some may call voting dookie doo. I think the only difference would be the illusion of accountability. Great. Voting is just a census of sentiment. That's it. Yeah. And I personally am not a fan of government. Like, I don't like government rules. I don't like the government, intrusions. I don't like government in itself, right? This is one of the reasons why I even studied up on like being like the whole sovereign citizen thing. Why I understand, like I took in the Constitution, learned, what the constitutional rights were. I find that more time goes on, the government is conducting themselves that is further and further and further away from the heart of what it was that the Constitution was trying to establish, right? And that being like us as individuals conducting ourselves as if we were our own sovereign nation. Like this is really this part right here is very hard, especially from like the sovereign citizen thing. But that's ultimately what the rules were supposed to do, right? It was going to leave the property owners, which is, I guess, is another kind of thing that you'd have to kind of judge for yourself on it. But essentially, it was going to leave the property owners in a position in which that nothing could happen to them so long as they were on their property, right? They can conduct themselves in any fashion that they chose was most appropriate for them so long as they stayed on their property, right? And to me, that is like the most freedom. But you can't do that, right? Here's something. People say, no, you got to have like this rule of order. You got to have governance. You got to have my favorite, democracy, right? Democracy. It's crap, right? Here's a good example of democracy and how it works. You got 4 people. Each of them have a chunk of property. All the properties are right next to each other, right? It's like a grid, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. And of these 4 properties, one of them has access to water. But we live in a democracy. So we're going to vote. And don't worry, everybody gets a vote, including you, right? Your property with the water on it. But we're going to all vote on whether or not we have access to your property. So your vote counts, you get your vote. But the 3 of us have voted that your water is now our water too. Right? Welcome to democracy. So I understand that there's a lot of great things that can come from it, but that's also another thing that can come from it. All right, moving on. All right, lumberjack landlord. It's great to see you up in here, man. You hear that? Let me see. Remaining. Okay, here we go. Remaining and honor is key. Yeah. All right. You hear that, lumberjack landlord? Deja vu made it to retirement. Deja vu, good for you. Happy for you. Yeah, absolutely. I think we're all happy for you. Right on, all-nighter. I'm just guessing all-nighter hider Deja is likely older than me. They know cash is king. Yeah. All right. Invictus for churning me onto this channel. Thanks, Dex Invictus. All right, man. Well, thanks for being here. I really appreciate you. All right, Midwest. All right, you guys are both here, Dex. It's okay, got it. I love you, Matt. Let's do a Vegas party for your retirement. Hell yeah. That's going to be fun. I got to get those airline tickets. I got to order those this week. Yeah, Vegas trip. That's going to be awesome. Mike Zuber's one rental at a time, 50,000K YouTube channel celebration. So that's going to happen down in Vegas, and I'm looking forward to that next month. Yeah, he actually told me I was going to be, I didn't realize, I know he asked me to speak down there, but he asked me to be the keynote speaker. I'm like, whoa, oh my gosh. So that's a pretty good honor to have, and I'm looking forward to doing that. So I'm going to come up with something really good to talk about, I think. Well, I hope so anyway. Go down there and just wing it. Oh, jeez. Oh, gotta open the door. Hold on one second, guys. There we go. No matter. Right on, brother. Okay. An alcoholic's body can be so saturated with and dependent on booze that to quit cold turkey can kill them. This seems like an analogy to the dollar. To quit cold turkey would kill the world's economy. Yeah, no, that's actually true. That's a great way for an analogy. You know, that's so weird. Alcohol saturation, man. Not to continue to talk about it, but I don't know if I've ever told you guys the story of the lady that we had taken up to Portland. So Portland's like a couple hours from here, right? I don't even know if I should tell you guys the story. It's really kind of sad, but it says a lot, in my opinion, about not only alcohol, but then also the idea of like the alcohol saturation, cutting that off, like the dollar, and causing the turmoil from it. I mean, listen to what this poor girl, like this lady, she couldn't have been older than me. She was probably 5 or 6 years younger than I am, right? So I'm 47, so she was probably in her 40s, early 40s. And she had been drinking so much, so continuously for so long that she was completely saturated. Like, she was just like hammered all the time, like 100% drunk all the time for a long time. Like, not just like a few days. We're talking like months and months of this, years of drinking, but like the last few months have just, been nonstop, like straight up drunk the entire time. Liver failing, like everything bad, like sick, dying, whatever. So she's saturated, and we're going to take her up to Portland, right? And we go to the family's house, and we get her, right? She walks out of the house on her own power, like, she's kind of stumbling a little bit, but she walks out of the house, and we get her into the Explorer, right? This was my old, you guys remember that old green Explorer? I originally started doing videos in it, right? So we get her into the Explorer, and she's talking, like, she was like, oh, hey, and I knew her, so she knew me, she called me by name, and we put her in the back seat. She's got blankets and pillows, and she's passing out, like, just trying to just lay there. We start driving to Portland. We get about halfway to Portland, so we're about an hour into this trip. And she kind of comes to, and she says, am I in medics? Right? She thought she was in an ambulance, being transported in an ambulance, right? And, we told her who she was with and stuff, and she was like, oh, okay, well, she kind of came to a little bit, and then she passed back out again. So we get up to this facility that is going to deal with her, and get her, dry her out, or figure out what they got to do with her. And so we pull up to this like clinic, to this hospital, and she gets out of the car on her own power, right? Kind kind of says goodbye, gives us a hug, whatever, and walks into the building, right? And so we get back into the Explorer and we leave. We go home. So the next day, we call to check on her. And they said at the clinic that she had a blood alcohol level that was so high that they thought that she should have been dead, and they sent her to the hospital because there was no way that they could deal with her at this particular clinic. This is how bad it was. Like, they literally thought that she should be, like, she was going to die right there with them. Now, you got to think, this is after 2 hours of being in a car where I know she didn't drink because I was there, right? Was able to walk on her own power, was able to communicate, and yet had so much alcohol in her that the clinic thought that she should have been dead. They sent her to the hospital, right, where, she didn't die, whatever. 2 weeks later, I don't even think it was 2 weeks later, I think it was probably about a week and a half, she did die. Like, organs finally failed and just couldn't do it anymore. But it just blew me away. Like, how much abuse went into her, and yet she was upright and moving. See, this is the dollar, right? This is the dollar in the same sense. People say, you can't do it, you can't do it. No, you're right. Like, if we were to try and do that, we couldn't do it. Like, it doesn't make sense to us because the moment that we get to a certain point, we would just no longer be able to function anymore. But yet, there is people out there who can and do, right? And if you have conditioned yourself over years and years and years, what doesn't make sense to us does make sense to them. All right? And this is the same thing with the dollar that's going on right now. It's like, I don't know how to even describe it anymore. It's like the dead man walking, but yet they can communicate. They can do it. Like, they don't even, like, so much so that you don't even recognize how bad it is. Anyway, okay. That was a fun story, right? I don't know why I told that. Sorry, guys. I hope that didn't just totally depress you. Did I get another one? Lumberjack Landlord? Holy moly, look at that, man. Thank you so much for the $100, man. You guys are just... Thank you, man. That's actually going to help pay for this damn ticket to go down to Vegas, man. Thank you so much. All right. Appreciate you. Looking forward to meeting you in person. Yeah, I am really looking forward to hanging out down there with you guys. I think this is going to be one of the funner trips. Did I say that right? Yeah. And not saying like all the rest of the conferences aren't fun. I mean, Rebel Capitalist is a kick-ass event. The Silver Symposium was a lot of fun. But I think this one is going to be like, this one is like to go down and hang out and really just like meet up and have fun, right? That's what, like, I think the whole meetup is going to be like. And so I'm looking forward to that. Not to mention, like, it's Vegas, right? So a couple of days in Vegas. Meet at the next symposium. Yes, absolutely. Oh, that's so awesome of you. Thank you, Matt. All right. Congratulations, Chicken's Life. That's amazing. Yes, it is. Thank you, Dishes. That's my wife, by the way, for those of you who don't know who Dishes Every Day is. All right. All good, my man. Happy to be part of the community. Simon started. Yeah, well, thank you guys for being here. And, I'm going to, like I said, I'm trying to bring that value to you. I'm excited about it. Like, I thought about it, like, even when I woke up this morning, I'm like, man, how can I bring more value to these membership videos so that it's worth it to them, so that I know that what I'm doing is like, worthy of the dollar. Like, I know it's just $1, but to me, it's a lot. Like, to me, it seems like a lot just because of the fact that I'm charging, right? If I charge for it, I have to bring you the best, right? Or else I shouldn't be doing that. I shouldn't be charging. So I got to bring you the best. All right. He who votes with hammer votes best. Very cool. My buddy drank away the 2 small bridges that connect the hemisphere of his brain. He's still functional, but it shows. Yeah, right? It's sad to watch it happen, but like, even just recently, like, what was it, last year, a little over a year, a couple years ago, my friend Jenny, when she passed away, we all worked together, like, and we saw it happen, and like, it was so hard. It was so hard because everybody wanted to like. The problem with it was is that it's like people didn't know what to do to help, right? When Ginny passed away, and she was like, we all knew she had the issue. She knew she had the issue, right? And it was like it was too much for her. She got like the news that said like we don't even know like, but we know that she had like medical problems. Like the doctors were like, you're dying, you're gonna die, or something of that nature. And she didn't stop. Like she would be at work, like you could tell, like Ginny, you were drinking at lunch. Like we can tell. Like you can tell by the way you're sounding. We could smell it on you. You know. And everybody wanted to like try and catch her. Like, oh, I could tell, I caught her, I saw her, I did, it was just like, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to catch her at doing the obvious? I mean, yeah, she's drunk and she's dying. Why are you trying to catch her at that? Like, that's not, what are you try and guilt her into like admission or something like that, or prove her wrong or something like that? That's not like, I don't understand why all these people were doing that. Like, you know. Not saying that I was doing anything great, but at least I was just like, Jenny, do you want to go to a meeting? Do you want to go and hang out? Do you want to do anything other than drink today? Like, because I'll be there for you, whatever you want to do. You want to go to a concert? I'll even pay for it, right? She wanted to drink. And that was it. And one day she just wasn't around anymore. It's hard. It's hard watching that happen, But there's nothing you can really do. You can't get mad at them, right? Because getting mad isn't going to do anything. It'll never change anything about anybody out there. Getting mad is just like, it's almost pointless. Even being sympathetic doesn't really work. The only thing you can do is offer it up. Say, hey, I'm here. I know where the meetings are at. We can go do whatever it is you want to do, but that's the only thing you can really do. And she ultimately made that decision that she didn't want to stick around for it. Sad. I miss Ginny. She was my friend. I called her my mouthy little guardian angel. Like she was like 5'2" and like former Seabee in the Navy. Like I saw pictures of her when she was like really fit. Like she was just stacked. She had these huge arms and just like, but then to see her like before she passed away, she was just so small and so like thin and just frail. It was just, so sad. But yeah, anyway, moving on. All right. Hey, everyone. Happy to be here enjoying the live stream. Thank you very much. Sorry, I don't mean to like drag you down with the whole stories and everything, but whatever. Okay. Question. Any plans on the next RCL on the Rebel Capitalist Live? Yeah, I really want to go. I got to get a hold of George and see if I can get him to give me some tickets, to get in, because the Rebel Capitalist event is very expensive, and it's in Orlando, so that'll be a lot of fun. It would be cool to take the family to go so that maybe we could hang out there and go do Disneyland or Disney World or whatever. But I should definitely to make it to the Rebel Capitalist, if nothing else. So I don't know. You gonna go all nighter? Welcome, pimp. Oh, I see. That's okay. Got it, man. Welcome. It's top-notch UE. Addiction took a lot of years from me. Wouldn't say I wasted the time. I had to experience that on this life. Yeah, and that's something else that I would honestly say is that I would never take back any of the times. Maybe there was a couple of times where I was acting like a shithead, but I would never really take back any of my drinking days. I enjoyed the moments. I enjoyed hanging out at the bar. I enjoyed socializing with the people. I enjoyed a lot of the parties and stuff like that. Like I had a lot of fun, and I wouldn't give any of that stuff up. Like I wouldn't, because it was good. It was a good time. But when you get into a point of abuse, then then it's not good anymore. All right. It's rough, not the first. All right, the bad times put good times onto better positive perspectives. Absolutely. I'm going to the RCL. Good for you, all-nighter. I'm going to have to make it. I'm going to have to do it. Like, there's no other choice, man. All right, what happened to those kids who ran away in Astoria? Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, Penny and all that. Okay, so update on that story. Pretty interesting. So Penny made it to New York. Her and Jonathan made it to New York. They turned themselves into the Warwick police, uh, claiming, that there were some issues back home that they don't want to go back. And so the Warwick police, I guess, did an investigation or whatever on whether or not they were going to send Penny home. Oregon, here filed for the return of Penny, so they want Penny back here, in the state with her parents. And it apparently that's what Warwick police have come to the determination of as well. From what I understand, I'm not positive on that. There's petitions and all kinds of stuff to try and prevent Penny from being sent back home, but apparently that's like, what the outcome is from, all the investigations and legal, insights or whatever has happened. I mean, I'm not that close to the details of what's happening, so this is stuff that I'm picking up, like, secondhand and stuff like that too. Um, my wife has been paying a little bit closer attention to the details of it, so she could probably explain things a lot easier than I could. But that's kind of the situation that's happening right now. From what I understand, she is not back home. She is still in New York, but that, the eventual, returning back to her parents is going to be taking place. That's the news that I've heard so far. Nobody else is in trouble for anything, for what I've gathered. Not by, at least not yet. So, but anyway, not much not much to really add to that, huh? Okay. All right. It's right before I go to Alaska too, is it? Okay. We can be conference buddies. Let's laugh out loud. Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, you're at all of them, so it's just like, we might as well just make it a team effort on all those things to go to these conferences. But they're well worth it. I mean, if you haven't been to one of the, like the Rebel Capitalist or, an economic conference like those, I would imagine that, the one here for Mike Zuber is probably going to be very much along the same lines of it. And these things are just, they're awesome. They are so much fun to be at. The it's really kind of interesting. Like, the crowd has this very high, energetic, positive vibe to it, right? And even though a lot of times, like, the topics that are being discussed, like the speakers are out there, they're putting out, like, the doom and gloom or something like that, but really the general overall energy and atmosphere is very positive, very encouraging, very network orienting. Like, everybody's always like circling, like creating these circles and meeting each other and handing out business cards and stuff like that. So they're well worth attending. And I mean, at least for like the Rebel Capitalists, I mean, George puts together, like, the heavy hitters. He puts together some like awesome people to do some presentations up there. So the information that you get is like top notch. I find that it's almost too much information. Like, I feel almost overwhelmed by it all. And then I try to, like, at the end of the weekend, by the time the event is over, I'm thinking back and, like, to what some of the speakers have said, and I cannot remember all of it. Like, it is just like, it was just too much. But it's well worth it, and they're a lot of fun. And I mean, yeah, I mean, I want to continue to go to these things, and I would love to speak at the Rebel Capitalist again. Haven't been offered that quite yet. I mean, George has brought me up on a couple of speaking panels to kind of give my opinion about stuff. But it would be cool to do another speaking engagement at the Rebel Capitalist. That would be that would be cool too. Like, on top of all the other cool things that are happening. All right, where are we at? An hour and a half into this. Maybe we'll give it like another half an hour, and then we'll call it an evening. Uh, Sounds interesting. It takes a lot of energy, but they return more energy. Yeah. What are the Vegas dates? The Vegas is February 17th and 18th. Did I get that right? I'm pretty sure 17th and 18th. And yeah, I mean, you can find it, Mike Zuber, one rental at a time. You could probably find links to it from there. I will see if I can't find, something for it and put it down in the description of these videos for the next month or so. That way we can kind of get more people down there as well. Sounds like a gravy swimming pool. That's funny. Right on, guys. Well, this is a lot of fun. I really appreciate you all being out here doing this. And, I like the smaller live streams, I mean, it's a smaller community or a smaller, viewer of audience. And, a lot of times when you have a bigger view, you got more people, within the chats. But I think this is better. Like, I think this is a serious discussion. I think it's more for, those who are really appreciative of, like, being here and being in part of the community. I really like this. I mean, this is good times. I mean, I'm going to do the regular live streams as well, but I'm enjoying these membership only ones too. So, alrighty, guys. So, do we have any more questions? Is there anything else we want to cover? Is there a topic that we wanted me to try and reiterate on, or something else? I see that the chats have kind of slowed down. Maybe we're all getting tired. Gravy swimming pool. I can appreciate that. Yeah. Can you imagine a swimming pool full of gravy? Oh, it'd be nasty. It's like, remember, like when we were kids, we used to joke around about swimming in a pool of whiskey or something like that. And I think about that now, like how horrible that would be. Appreciate you. Well, thank you, Dex. Peace. Maybe you could post these for everybody after too. I don't know. What do you think? I was gonna keep them just for the members. Trying, like, something incentive, to incentivize people to become a member so that they can, go and watch some of the member only videos. But then I also thought, like, this is for us. Like, I mean, I could release it. I mean, I don't think it really matters, to you guys whether or not I release it for the public. But I thought I would keep it more like just for us, and keep it just for the members. And then, like I said, that would incentivize people to actually become a member. But I don't know. What do you think? Should we just go ahead and release it for everybody to view? I mean, I don't know. Peace, maybe. Oh, we already said that one. Thank you so much. Yeah, well, thank you, Deja Vu. And thank you, everybody. I mean, I can't seem to thank you guys enough for everything you've ever done. I mean, Lumberjack and Jaws hitting me with these awesome super chats. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, thank you so much for taking time out of your day just to do that and then contribute such a significant amount. I mean, that's like, that's huge. That's a huge deal. And, I don't know how to thank you guys. I just really don't. So, all right, Almater, you could trickle them out later. Easy content for you. Yeah, and that's another thing I was thinking. Like, maybe, post them, a week or two afterwards, so people can go and see what it is that we are talking about here in the members only. That's probably a pretty good idea. Release them a couple of weeks later. And you're right, that's easy content too. So I can just, like, put it out there and people can go and check it out and get more stuff out there. It's getting late, huh, guys? All right. Why don't we call it quits? I think we're done for the evening. We had a great time here. We talked all kinds of good stuff. I hope I didn't depress anybody with the stories, especially the story of Jenny. But I think it's important, I mean, like, it's hard to see somebody going through something like that, and it's hard to know what to do, we could all see it taking place, and, the only thing I could do was just give her my support, and just say, hey, I'm here for you. But, it is depressing kind of story, but then it's also, in my opinion, I think it would also be very helpful, because if you know somebody who's experiencing something like that, a lot of times we want to get mad. We want to get mad at them, and that's not going to help, right? What's going to help is being supportive, and the only thing you can do is be there for them, and hope they make that decision that they want to change, and you can be there and help them be part of that change. Okay, thank you, Simon, and everyone. These are great. Yeah, release it. Why not? Okay, guys. Well, I mean, hey, when it comes to this members only, you're as much as part of this as I am, right? So, I mean, if you feel that it's something that we should go ahead and release for everybody to see, let's do that. I mean, I was going to keep it just exclusive for us, but, if it's something that, you think the rest of the community can benefit from, then yeah, let's do it. Let's make it happen. So we'll give them a little bit. We'll make them wait like a couple of weeks, and then we'll release it for them to view afterwards. So, thank you guys. Love the talk. Yeah, thank you, All Nighter. I appreciate that, man, because I love being out here doing this, and sometimes I feel a little goofy, especially when I saw some guy come walking up and he kind of looked like right into the windshield, like, what the hell is that guy doing, but it's fun for me, and I really enjoy doing this, and I could do this for like the rest of my life. Like, if this was my job, I would be so happy. Like, I would be so happy if I could just do this for my income for the rest of my life, and and consider it good. But I'm gonna have to bring a lot more value if that's gonna be the way it's gonna be. All right. I always wondered why that Fed speech in 2019 has so much information in it. Why did they want to get that information out? Was that the most information they could put out there? No, I don't think it was. I just think it happened because there he goes again. Because you're talking about monetary policy strategies for a low neutral interest rate world, and I believe that's the one you're talking about. And there are other speeches from the Fed that are similar to this, right? I keyed in on this one because I had broken it down like in the initial part of when I first started the channel. This was one of the very first speeches that I had really kind of broken down and thought, man, this is important. And then I did like several videos talking about this speech. Like, I mean, I broke it down to like, I don't know, 5 or 6 sections or something like that, trying to really understand it. And I go back and I look at those videos that I did, and man, did I, like, even in those videos, like, I really didn't understand what was being said in these speeches. I was like trying to figure it out. But there's other speeches that they have done and other communications that they have put out that are very similar in this, and I think probably like the key point that you can hear in this, and because like even go and look at like the recent Michelle Bowman speech, like I think she did one like a month ago, like within the last month. And you go and look in that speech that she had done, and she talks about the 3 major issues, right, that the Federal Reserve was facing. And I think that's probably those 3 issues are mentioned several times, like over and over again from the Federal Reserve. Not so concentrated like in a speech like this, but just in generally speaking, like these 3 issues are the problem. They had the demographics issue, right? Older population, weighing in on, weighing the economy down. They don't contribute a lot to the economy, but they take a lot from it. So like the demographics issue, they had the global growth slowing down, and they had interest rates that were too low, right? Those 3 issues. And they bring that up pretty regularly, like right after this speech, even before this speech, and even just recently, like I said, that Michelle Bowman speech. So it's not like I think that they had this one speech was very informative and the rest of them weren't. I like really hyper focused in on it because I felt like it was one of the biggest like preliminary admissions to what it was that the Federal Reserve needed to do, right? And in this speech, I think is probably one of the, just straight up just says it, like, we have issues, we need to deal with them, or else we are going to fail, right? I mean, it ultimately says that. Now, he doesn't say that they're gonna fail, but he said that the problem that they need to solve these days was that the risk of inflation that is persistently too low rather than too high. The problem they need to solve, right? If they didn't solve it, they were gonna have some major issues taking place. And so I think that's probably like, another like understanding the Fed in from your own view, right? Because I've gone over this speech so many times, and because I have done that, it makes it. I can see where, like, you would take that view, almost like, man, how come they put all this information out beforehand? But they put it out constantly, right? It's all the time. You just have to be able to filter through and find that information when they give it out. And it's not like in the news going, oh, hey guys, critical information, this came out in the Fed speech. They don't do it like that. Like, you have to recognize it for yourself, because nobody else is going to bring it up. I mean, I might bring it up if I see it, right? If I happen to catch it. Alrighty. They know few will read it and fewer will understand it, and yet even fewer will use it to their advantage. Yeah, I totally agree with that, all-nighter. That is like, I really, because that's another thing. Like, I bring up the speeches all the time, but how many other, like, I very rarely see like a news article that says, okay, in Federal Reserve speech given on this day, they said this. Like, I don't think I've ever read a news article that had something like that in it, ever. Like, they might bring up certain Fed documents, excuse me, and they might like interview a Fed official after they have given a speech, and they might talk about that speech a little bit, but never really do I ever see like a YouTube commentator or news outlet or news article or something like that saying, breaking down, like, in this Fed speech this was said. I don't see that ever. Like, ever. And I question that. Like, why is that happening? I mean, these guys are basically saying straight up what it is that they plan on doing, and nobody looks at it. Like, why? I mean, I just like, I mean, I'm all over it. Like, I'm on it like glue, This is like, man, another Fed speech came out. What's in it? And I just start reading through. Most of the time, they're pretty boring, So, I don't know. All right, guys. I was going to go home. What's happening here? All right. Okay, the man carries Fed speeches with him. That's high level. I do. I have that one. I have New Economic Challenges for the Fed's Monetary Policy Review. This is the Jerome Powell one. This one's really good. This one was given August 27th, 2020. If you're looking for like some at-home reading material right now that you wanted to kind of go over, I would read Monetary Policy Strategies for a Low Neutral Interest Rate World if you haven't read that one yet. That one was from November 30th of 2018, and the other one is that New Economic Challenges in the Fed's Monetary Policy Review, given by Jerome Powell on August 27th, 2020. Those two speeches are incredibly informative. What else do I have here? The International Monetary Fund's need for a growing liquidity. This is the Triffin's Dilemma video. I think I did, like, what was it, yesterday or something like that, that we had talked about. This is a really good one. Like, I mean, it's very short, but it's like, there's so much information inside of there that like really makes a lot of sense to why we are in the situation we are in. And literally, this thing is not very long. It's only this long. Like, that's it, But it basically talks about the liquidity issues and having to get rid of the gold standard and to provide the world with that safe and liquid assets. I mean, it's really quickly described right here in that one. So yeah, that's another good one to go read. What else do I have here? I got all kinds of stuff. Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco economic letter, the average inflation targeting in the financial crisis recovery. You want to learn about average inflation rate? Everybody's talking about inflation targeting. They're not targeting inflation. They're going for an average inflation rate. And in fact, I think it says right here, the Federal Reserve adopted average inflation targeting as part of its long-run monetary strategy framework in 2020. I mean, it straight up says it right there. They have adopted average inflation targeting. They don't do inflation targeting where they go for a 2% target. They go for average inflation rate over time, and this is the type of stuff. Like, if you don't read this, then who's telling you? Nobody. Nobody's telling you about the average inflation rate over time. But it's clearly stated right here in January 10th of 2022, when this particular economic letter was written, talking about the situations that have been taking place over the last couple of years. Yeah. No, that's why I don't listen to anybody. I only listen to the things that I find and I read. Like, people were telling me, dude, you're so lost. You don't know nothing about the Federal Reserve. And then they, give me all these reasons and explanations. And I say, man, dude, you got a lot of logic. This is very logical speaking, everything that you said inside of it, right? But it contradicts the things that I've learned. I don't know what to say. Like, I understand, somebody's opinion on things and, how it makes a lot of sense. You can even pull things from history and stuff like that. Oh, this is what I'm reading. This is where I'm getting my information from, and how I'm figuring out the Fed's strategy is by reading stuff like this, And I carry them with me, which is crazy to think, because I do. What else do I have in here? I got all kinds of stuff. What is this one? Anyway, guys, I'm going to go home. It's been a lot of fun hanging out with you this evening. Thank you so much for everything that you do for the channel and all the support, super chats, the great comments, the awesome emails that you send me, the wonderful, things I get in the mail. That's another thing. I got to go check my mail. Apparently I have a package there that is at the post office, but they couldn't fit it in my post office box. And every time I go there, they're closed. So I got to go to the post office while they're open to get another package, and then I will open up these things on the next video. Alrighty, guys. I'm going to call it, right? Good night. You guys have a wonderful evening. Let me read the last chats here so I don't leave those hanging. Alright. You're the Fed whisperer. That's funny. FOMC needs UE. I wonder who really is analyzing the way you do. That might be the problem. Nobody, I don't think anybody. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night. Thanks, you. Yeah, you as well. Just to kind of say that one, I don't think anybody's really analyzing the Federal Reserve quite like I do, right? Now, I would imagine that there is a lot of people who do look at the Federal Reserve, look at their Fed speeches, stuff like that, but they are not trying to figure out how it is that they are supposed to conduct themselves. They are doing analytics for some corporation, right? They are actually professionals trying to figure out, what it is that there's, to write in their report for their company or something of that nature. I think very few people down here in the working class, average Joe, trying to figure things out, trying to figure out how they can, invest for their family or their retirement and stuff like that. Very few of us are studying things like this, right? We are a very rare breed. So, yeah, keep at it, right? Keep learning, because we have a position, we are taking a position for ourselves that's unlike anybody else's. Like, once you understand the Fed, the monetary policy, and a lot of the economic forces that are out there, you will be amazed at how much information that your day job is giving you before anybody else has it. Like, the stuff that we do every day at our day jobs, when we clock in on our 9-to-5ers and, we're doing our day jobs every day, we are living the life of information that all these other economists and people are looking for. They're waiting for the data to come out so they can see it on a piece of paper or on a screen. They're trying to look for the information that we have already lived. Think about that for just a second. We have first access to the information because we are living it in real time. Most of us just can't see it because we don't know enough about economics or the monetary policies, or even worse, we start blaming it on other outside forces or something else out there. But that's something that is very special that I don't think a lot of people quite realize. Like, how advantageous just that position really is for us. I mean, it was one of the reasons why I was able to call out the lumber market as well as I was able to do it. It's because of the position that I was in. I do retail sales. Like, I literally ring people up at a counter and I sell 2x4s and I go and load them up in their truck. But being in that position and then having access to all the information that I did from the network that I have, all the mills, the vendors, the distributors, the truck drivers, the loggers, everybody. There was nobody that I didn't have access to as far as information goes. And because of the position that I was in, I was able to clearly see what was happening long before anybody else was. And you can do that too from the position that you're in. Like, whether you're working a restaurant or you're at some factory or you're an auto mechanic or you're whatever, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it is that you are doing, right? You have first access to the information that all these other guys are looking for. It's important. Remember that. Okay, I'm going to go. Uneducated Economist, you guys let me know. And I'll upload this. We'll release this next Wednesday. We'll give them a week, right? And then we'll see how that goes. All right, one more. I got to read it and then I got to go. All right. My sight and understanding as I live and walk around has changed big time since learning real econ. Yeah. Good night, everyone. All right, good night. The lights went out. We're done. See you guys. Have a great evening. You let me know.